So, welcome back to part number 5 of Oppenheimer film thoroughly explained and analyzed. And this is the last part. It will be hopefully much shorter than the previous 4 parts. I'm Raphael Daniel, and I'm a cinema critic and researcher. And in these videos, we were exploring themes and symbols in the Oppenheimer films and some of Nolan's intentions and messages regarding politics, human psychology, and perhaps also some spiritual ideas, inspirations, or themes. And I don't have much more to say. Finishing 40 to 45 minutes previous videos. I have a few notes more, so I'll go back to them. I'll approach to it, and perhaps after finishing, I'll say a few concluding words. I'm still not sure. Now again, as always, forgive me for my English, as it is not my native language, but as I always say, I think it's good enough, although sometimes a bit slow. So I was asking last time, before finishing video, whether Nolan is trying to say to us that the two apparently different reasons for which Louis Strauss is doing his illegal moves in order to remove Oppenheimer's security classification and kick him out from the nuclear power committee are actually two different reasons, or is it ultimately one reason? And I was talking about one reason being Strauss's geostrategic perception and his approach to national defense and security issues. Now, he's the security guy, and he doesn't want anyone to have a more powerful weapon than the US, and he's not satisfied with Oppenheimer being the official nuclear guy. Strauss maybe was the head of the committee, but Oppenheimer, being what he is, of course, was a very influential figure in it. And so Oppenheimer, as I've said, was trying to reduce the damage or danger, as he confesses to Einstein about his belief of what the atom bomb is going to lead to, the total destruction element. He's trying to reduce the damage and to prevent the US from giving too much knowledge and facilities to other countries, and as we can see in the film, and prevent the development of the hydrogen bomb, which is much more big scale and destructive than the regular atom bomb that was already developed and tried. Now, and I was saying that, and this is the main theme that we're dealing with in these videos, that Oppenheimer is a kind of a dual figure. He's like the Picasso painting that he observes in the museum in the beginning of the film as a young student, which is double-faced. We see that Oppenheimer is double-faced, and I was exploring this in the last video, this element in him, and was also describing in my own words these scene in which Nolan shows us Oppenheimer splitting into his consciousness after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs and destruction, and the US victory, which is also a non-victory as Oppenheimer sees it, but he's really splitting or being fragmented. And so talking about this duality, we've talked a lot about Oppenheimer also being a responsible person with empathetic and responsible mottos in his heart and drives, and a caring person trying to reduce the amount of nuclear power in the world to minimum. Also feeling guilty and that he has blood on his hand. And on the other hand, he has another part which is sometimes doing it in a humiliating way, in the way that he sits in the discussion hall and is contradicting Strauss's geostrategical proposals, is making everyone laugh. And Strauss is very angry, very humiliated, and planning a revenge. Another thing that we're talking about that is leading Strauss to a long-term hostility towards Oppenheimer is first Strauss's background, his own typical image as a weak person. However, big political figure, he managed to make out of himself the self-made man, as he calls himself. And the Princeton incident, where after his psychologically hurt, biased interpretation to why Einstein, after he introduces, it's not the first time that Oppenheimer is meeting Einstein, but after he introduces Einstein to Oppenheimer in Princeton, why Einstein is not talking again to Strauss anymore, ever. Now, Strauss thinks that it's because that Oppenheimer said something dirty about him, about Strauss, but we find later on that it is because Oppenheimer confesses to Einstein that he thinks that the low chance of a chain reaction that will destroy the world and humanity will actually take place. But he's not talking about an atomic chain reaction. He's talking about the psychological, social chain reaction. We were talking about this. I'm going to say a few more words about that, which are a bit novel soon in relation to what was said by now, or maybe in a way sharper or concluding. Maybe it's a better way to say that. And now, going back to those two reasons for which Strauss is doing what he does, which will lead, as I said, it will get back to him as a boomerang. There's also a chain reaction, and he will have his own kick out in later years, as we see in the film, from the Ministry of Commerce and Trade. These two reasons, one is being personally insulted and personally avenging, and the other reason having a national, somewhat aggressive, security defensive approach, which is ultimately hostile and somewhat blind and egoistical is, and this is why Einstein is not going to talk. This is the real reason for which Einstein is not going to talk with him anymore, and it's not personal. Einstein just doesn't want to talk to these people anymore, also because he knows that they just use him for these purposes which are destructive, as he says to Oppenheimer towards the end of the film. And then in the party that finishes the film, before the vision of the last vision is the vision of Oppenheimer being in airplane, some aircraft, and seeing the Earth, various atom or hydrogen bombs destroying the Earth. Before that, we see the party in which the very old Oppenheimer and Kitty are meeting all these people that they used to work with, and the way that they approach them is similar to what Einstein was warning Oppenheimer many years before that from. So my idea is that Nolan, or my notion or feeling, is that Nolan is trying to tell us that the personal insult and avenging drive that is leading Strauss to do what he's doing to Oppenheimer, and the national security drive and perception are actually a very similar thing. And it's just the human survival ego mechanism, which is producing conflict and is perceiving itself, whether nationally or personally, as an isolated island, unprotected, a self-centered self-image of someone who is hurt and needing to psychologically and physically defend himself. And it's so consuming that people, in this case Strauss, are becoming destructive and also delusional. And Nolan, time and again in his films, is dealing with delusional figures, and he's not doing it because he's interested in some unique freaks of society. He's, of course, talking about us. Now, maybe we don't have this problem, the very specific and unique problem that Lenny in the film Memento has, but the problem that Lenny has is a way to describe our own typical loops and mazes that we live in, and our very typical strong emotions that are coming out typically out of being hurt and creating grand protagonist narratives around these feelings of being hurt or not good enough, and traumatic experiences. And then we just can't get out of it, and we create more and more agony for ourselves and for others. And Nolan is seeing that in humanity, and he's this kind of a person who believes that humanity can heal and get out of this. And as I believe, and I think this is why he's doing most of his films. Last things about the previous things that were said in previous videos is that arrogant, charismatic hubris element in Oppenheimer that is on one hand creating unity and trying to reduce damage and make the world more orderly. I mean, this is one part, but he uses his arrogance many times in order to push these to promote these important intentions. But his arrogant hubris is not a different part from the part in him that is interested in the bomb, however, being cautious and skeptical, as I was talking about, wanting to see it explodes, wants have the ecstatic drive to create it, the power element, and which is connected to life energy or vitality, and the film is dealing or partially dealing with the right way to understand our life power and the way that we can carry out our vitality in life. And so I recommend you watching the former videos if you still haven't, and you'll have links below for that. And now I'm going back to my notes. And so I want to say that I was also talking last time about what Kitty experiencing, that the control mechanism that is being operated in the US in order to defend the US and prevent the bomb knowledge from getting to the communists and so on is actually creating some fascist typical elements in those same guys that officially, at least, they want to protect the liberal and Democrats way and freedom. And so they need to operate a lot of controlling inside the country and not just against others. And maybe it's the same thing, because when you become a control freak, then you're just a control freak. It's not the God, so to speak, doesn't know if you're fighting the other nation or if you're fighting your own nation. What do you know? Like the objective perception is that you're in conflict with people. And so what they do to Kitty, I said, is they for many years they follow her, they invade her life, and in sake of national security, and also the communist background and so on and so forth. We're talking about all these things. And so I want to say that the invasive spying on the family is somewhat like a sexual invasion, or, forgive me for being maybe a bit too explicit, but maybe also even penetration. Not in the literal sense, of course, because we don't see anything like that in the film, but in terms of the human drive, her penetrating her privacy, her life, and ultimately, I think this is what the film shows us, her soul. This is, I think, at least one of the reasons for which Kitty will boycott Teller forever, because Teller, the hydrogen, the Manhattan Project guy, and the hydrogen bomb promoter and first person to propose it. He's we see in the same party that I mentioned towards the end of the film that she's not willing to shake his hand. And this is very dramatic, and we hear this dramatic music when it happens. And right after that, we have this last vision of the film, the last picture we see of what I said about Oppenheimer being in space and seeing the world being destroyed. And you know, this separation between people, because the ego, self-centeredness, the artificial archetype of the center, and in an extreme individuality, and the hubris element, what they do, they don't unite, they separate. And so we see her keeping her gloved hands one upon another, and she's giving Teller this look. And I want to ask, is Teller, who was kind to Oppenheimer and friend, but also testified against Oppenheimer, is he not addicted to following what I said about the sexual element here, to the eroticism of explosions that I was talking about in talking about Oppenheimer, and is it not a power and aggression way of eroticism? Now, and I really recommend you going back to past videos to hear more about that. In the hearing the social classification discussions that Strauss arranged for Oppenheimer, Oppenheimer is quite passive, and they kind of in my native language, when we want to say that someone is doing something bad to you, really bad, when someone is really getting to you, we say he's entering you. And I think that what Rob and most of the other guys in the discussions room are doing to Oppenheimer is, in a way, you know, fuck him. And this metaphor you have in English, or I believe in most languages in the world, maybe all of them, and maybe not for nothing. And maybe it's not just a funny thing, this metaphor that we have in language. And they kind of show him, and the Americans show the whole of the world, who is the owner, who is the man, you know, who is the powerful male figure, not just person in the world now. And the way that Truman is talking about him, me, not you, Oppenheimer, he says to him, I dropped the bomb on Japan. The way he's doing is very flashy, and I think sexual. He's I almost see, you know, he just needs, of course he's a president, he'll not do that, but in a way you almost see him doing that. I did that to them, I fuck them, not you, because I have the power to do that. And now The climate crisis that we're facing now, well, it's denied, unfortunately, by many people. And there's all of this Trump problem, former President Trump and candidate, but we're facing climate crisis. And Nolan was vastly exploring that theme in his interstellar film. Right, humanity is almost dying because of a climate crisis following various things, including a Third World War. And in the last moment, love is producing them. The love and unity are producing them physical, scientific insight that is saving humanity from total annihilation in that film. And so the climate crisis now and the kind of weapons that we have nowadays and the amount of those weapons that we apparently have, and now also the progress in development of AI systems or artificial intelligence devices, as Nolan is saying in interviews from past few weeks or 2 months. Also mentioned that in past videos once or twice. He's really talking about them. You can hear him. It's interesting to hear him talk about that. This is maybe not really letting us have realistic, more actual options to continue playing this game of that we're playing, I think, for too many millennia, of the hurt and weak self-image dynamic, and having that image that I think when you're introspective, you see most people will see that in them that they have this type of self-image, and this type of self-image and the unease, deep emotional unease that is involved in having this self-image is resulting in the cultivation, typically, of an alternative and compensatory, I think you say in English, other artificial self-image of myself as being great and strong and powerful and wanting to be beautiful and successful and so on and so forth. Strauss is really caught in this dynamic between these two ends, so to speak, and on the spectrum, it's kind of shaky there. And Oppenheimer alludes to Kitty in their first meeting. He says to her that the person he part of what he wants to say, so it seems to me, is that the person who knows himself rationally and fundamentally, he knows that he's not much more than, and we explored this a bit as well, but now it's a bit of a different context, empty space or void, and that we don't actually have separate individual being in us. We're just, science shows that we're, and maybe not only science, that we're some substance and some energy in empty space. and and um, um, we find out that a large-scale nuclear Trinity or Trimurti experiment will eventually not create a chain reaction that would burn up the entire atmosphere and destroy the Earth and humanity, as we've said a few minutes ago. But, as I've said, a chain reaction that is operating in accordance to the principle of emotional reaction. This is my way to put it now. And this is breaking or hatching or hacking through one person to another in our world. As Oppenheimer informs Einstein and Princeton, as we've mentioned, this is the one thing that actually threatening to destroy the world. When we just had swords, or when we just had cannons, this was not as dangerous as it is now, because back then we were insultive and easily insulted, and our hurt pride and artificial self-images could lead us to extremely vicious and destructive wars. But now, still being that type of human beings, but having nuclear weapon and perhaps very soon very powerful AI systems, we might be much stronger in terms of destroying ourselves much more efficiently. So the insulted people of this world, and I believe that we are many, now we hold a good instrument for self-destruction, and I think maybe it's a far-fetched interpretation of Nolan, but this is how I see his message. Not only in this film, but in this film it's very, very urgent. That the movement, the human emotional and instinctive movement of pain and fear is one. It's not exactly an individual thing. It's a humanity thing, right? A chain reaction. It's us being like that. It's not me being like that, it's us being like that. And we transfer that to other people by wanting to be more powerful than them, by being insulted by them, and so on. And this is also maybe because we are so connected to one another and or to each other. However, we see ourselves as very separate, usually. In individualistic society, in nationalistic society, the other nation, there are totally other people, totally other religion, this family is a total different family, my enemy or rival and my neighbor is a total different person. Well, for Nolan, I think it's not like that. We're pretty similar. And 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 it's being demonstrated by this separative mind being so similar in so many people. So many people say, I'm so other from the other person, and the other person is thinking in the same way, so maybe it's not so different. And this sits on human needs which are very similar. having security, physical and psychological, wanting to feel belonging, sex, family, being hurt, wanting to be powerful when I'm hurt. This is very universal. And Oppenheimer is a very highly successful film. By now, the biggest second world film blockbuster in history of cinema. And so it's very popular in America, and it's very popular here in Israel. Different cultures, or I don't know, maybe Israel is a bit like America, but it's very popular in also, I think, in Asian countries and so on. And so we constitute as both theory of relativity, Einstein, and the quantum theory and mechanics, which is the what Oppenheimer is mostly standing for in the film and promoting. Both of them show that what we constitute, the universe, is a unified field, as they say in physics, and the universe being ultimately and maybe mysteriously just one object. And so yeah, we are approaching 40 minutes, unfortunately, but it's interesting, so maybe it is fortunate. And so in a fundamental sense, there is really no separate individual. I mean, there is, but I'm a separate individual, but in a deeper sense, and a deeper observation, it doesn't exist really. Or maybe I offer observing this, or questioning, or getting a bit into this issue, exploring this question, and or dilemma, and no separate nations really. Maybe it's just in our heads, or maybe there are separate nations and races as a fact, but maybe it's not such a big deal, and not such it doesn't have such a strong reality as it has in our minds, which proliferate the race, religion, and nation differences to an imaginary extent. So I'm concluding with one phrase, which is my own phrase, and this is how I conclude my experience of the Oppenheimer movie. So don't think that you can control controlling, because when you control, it is actually control which is controlling you. So if there's a way for us to face what we're going to face in the coming decade and 2 decades, which is healthy and practical, is to let go a bit. So thank you for watching. I'm Raphael Daniel, a cinema critic and researcher. I hope that you enjoy these videos, and if you've watched the other videos, that you enjoyed them as well, that you've managed to understand the movie better watching these videos and produce some insights. And if you haven't watched the other videos yet, I recommend doing it by order, one to 5, and you have links below. And you're warmly invited to like the video, to comment, to share it, or to do whatever seems to you a good contribution to this journey that I've uploaded to YouTube. And see you maybe in another time talking about maybe another film by Nolan or perhaps by somebody else.